Asus had a few other new laptops on show at CES 2019 outside of their gaming lineup, including the new powerful StudioBook S, ultraportable ZenBook S13, and new VivoBook 15. Let's find out what these new models have to offer. Let's start with the Asus StudioBook S, a new workstation laptop announced at CES 2019, being marketed as an ultra-portable, powerful machine for creatives. It's got a dark grey and black design with a grooved texture on the lid. You can get it with either a regular i7-8750H CPU, or if you need a bit more power, it's also available with a Xeon CPU. It's got NVIDIA Quadro P3200 graphics, and supports up to 64GB of ECC memory. So yeah, we're definitely not looking at gaming machines here. The 17-inch screen has a 1920 by 1200 resolution, so a 16 by 10 aspect ratio, which is more commonly found in this sort of machine. It's still got nice 5.3mm thin bezels, giving it an 84% screen-to-body ratio, along with an impressive 97% DCI-P3 coverage. Asus also had the internals of the StudioBook S on display, and the cooling didn't look too bad. 6 heat pipes, 2 fans, and 4 exhausts. Asus say that it's less than 35 decibels with the fans at max speed, so it would be interesting to see what temperatures we get under heavy load, as that's fairly quiet. We can also see there are 2 M.2 slots on the motherboard. Both are NVMe Gen 3 X4, allowing up to 4TB of storage in RAID 0 or 1. Despite these specs, it's still fairly thin at just 1.84cm, making it one of the thinnest laptops with Quadro graphics, and it weighs in at around 2.4 kilos. For the I/O, on the left there's a Kensington lock, power input for the 180W brick to charge the 3-cell 57Wh battery, USB Type-C port with Thunderbolt 3 support, HDMI 2.0 output, USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-A port, 3.5mm audio combo jack, and UHS-2 SD card reader. The right is pretty empty by design, with just 2 USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-A ports. The majority of people are right-handed, so while using a mouse, you'll be much less likely to have cables getting in the way. Sorry, lefties. Nothing really going on around the back, just some air exhaust vents. The keyboard has white backlighting, and it seemed alright to type with in my brief test. It's got some privacy shortcut buttons to let you lock the machine in case Windows and L is too many, or disable the camera or microphone. The speakers are up the back under the screen, and there's a fingerprint scanner over on the left. The touchpad has a button allowing you to convert it over to a numpad, but if you drag your finger around as if you're still using the touchpad, you can still use the mouse rather than it being just touchpad only. There were also a few ZenBooks on display. Of most interest, I thought, was the ZenBook S13. The 13.9-inch 1080p screen on this one just looks amazing. It's got a 400 nit brightness and 100% sRGB color gamut. It's got 2.5mm thin bezels on all sides, even down the bottom, which is usually not the case. This gives it a massive 97% screen-to-body ratio. In order to achieve this, there's actually a bump in the center up the top, so that the 720p camera can still fit. This wasn't bad. In fact, it actually made opening the lid a little easier, as it was just a little larger than the usual lip that's already there for you to get your finger under. The ZenBook S13 is available with up to NVIDIA MX150 graphics, and Intel Whiskey Lake i7-8565U CPU, so the same specs that the recent Razer Blade Stealth I reviewed had. The CPU was actually quite powerful for a U-series chip, based on my own testing, and the NVIDIA MX150 graphics are only really acceptable for light gaming with less demanding games, but most likely will be of more use to those using it for design work or other tasks that can benefit from GPU acceleration. It can also take up to 16GB of memory and a 1TB NVMe M.2 SSD, so fairly decent specs for something in such a thin and light form factor. It's just 1.29cm thin and weighs around 1.1 kilos. It's made out of a solid CNC milled piece of aluminium, and they actually had the different stages on display, which was pretty cool to see. It gives you an idea of how it's made from a solid block of metal. In terms of I/O, the ZenBook S13 has a 3.5mm audio jack, and is just able to fit a USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-A port on the right, while the left has 2 USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C ports, which support fast charging for the 3-cell 50Wh battery, and it also offers display connectivity, and finally a micro USB slot. With the lid open, it pushes the laptop up off the flat surface by 4 degrees, giving subtle keyboard elevation, but also improving cooling, as more air can now get to the fan underneath. The new VivoBook 13 X512 was also on display, available in a few different colours. They had red and blue here. I've tested an older VivoBook, but didn't get the model before this one. But they're generally a pretty good series in terms of value for those that don't need high-end specs. This one here has the i7-8565 CPU again, but up to NVIDIA MX130 graphics, 16GB of memory, up to 256GB M.2 SSD, and 2TB 2.5-inch hard drive, with a 15.6-inch 1080p screen. For I/O, on the left we've got two USB Type-A ports and status LEDs, while the right has a micro USB slot, 3.5mm audio output, USB Type-C port, no Thunderbolt though, HDMI 2.0 output, USB Type-A port, and the power input. Like the ZenBook, the bottom rises the laptop up a bit to help improve cooling by increasing airflow. Otherwise, the X512 just has a 2-cell 37Wh battery, so it seems like more of a general purpose laptop, which would be fine for most people that don't need powerful hardware. This is my 13th and final video on the laptops and PC hardware I saw at CES 2019 in Las Vegas. So let me know what you thought, and if you'd be interested in these sorts of videos at future events, as well as any suggestions or other things you'd like me to talk about. But for now, we'll be getting back into some regularly scheduled videos. So if you're new here, get subscribed for those.